Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to episode 162 of Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. Thank you for tuning in this evening. I'm your host, Scott Thomas Outler, and it is Monday, October the 25th, 2021. I hope everyone's new week is kicking off on a high note. Coming up on tonight's show, we have a special Halloween edition in the works. Red Fox from Alien Buddha Press has helped to set up a reading with the final four contestants in this year's House of Horrors contest. So the four stories we'll be hearing are Mihaila Melnick's The Gambler, Jacek Wilkos's What's Your Emergency, Kelsey Bryan Zwick's Femme Fatale and the Gun, and Ada Wofford's The Procession. After listening to all the pieces tonight, you can swing by the Alien Buddha Press Facebook group and cast your vote there. There's a link available in the show description that will take you straight to that post. So stay tuned for the final four authors in the House of Horrors contest coming up in just a bit. And in the meantime, please be sure to subscribe to the channel while you're listening to the show. And if you're interested in checking out past episodes of Songs of Selah, they can all be found in the archive at 17numa.com. 'Tis the season for ghosts, goblins, and other gnarly creatures wrenched from darker realms that sneak their way into our midst while the portal yawns. But are we not already in a permanent state of the masquerade at this point? All the scariest specimen are dressed up in white lab coats, with eugenicist schemes etched in their hearts, and the nihilistic thirst for death howling from their lungs, babbling all the while on corporate networks about manipulated data points constructed around a narrative skewed to fit the whims of profiteering lunatics. Halloween in 2021 doesn't need to bother with costumes. Its agenda is now as naked as an empire that's been exposed of all its heinous acts. The haunted House of Horrors has spilled out into the open. We're knee-deep in the mess of tricks orchestrated by demons as the system of the beast lets loose its great reset upon the world. But one vile monster in particular has drawn my attention these past 2 years, ever since we were swallowed in the fauces of his viral plot. So I thought I'd kick things off with a few words about this traitor to humanity. This is a little ditty that appeared recently at Dissident Voice called Of Ignorance, Nascience, and Outright Complicity. So let me get this straight. The guy who funded experiments through the NIAID to infect beagles with disease-causing parasites, only to eventually murder them after the results were found, and who oversaw the agency that okayed experiments where aborted baby scalps and organs were stitched onto rodents, is the same guy who bankrolled gain-of-function research through grants given to his buddy at EcoHealth Alliance to create chimera mutations on viruses from bats in Level 4 biolabs. Wow. Well, isn't that just so damn special you can hardly stand to think about it? You'd like to have faith that at some point the general public would find a clue and wake up from the stupor, rather than pucker their lips to kiss his repugnant feet while bowing before the doublespeak and worshiping him as a false idol. But I guess it's just one more sign of a completely deranged, decadent, delusional, disgraceful, wicked culture that they continue to adore such a weasel. And it's an example of just how corrupt and evil the forces that control the beast system truly are at this point in civilization's collapse. that instead of sending him packing with a pink slip and scarlet letters stamped on his forehead, they decide a better idea is to give him a fat raise and make him the highest paid federal employee in the entire stinking swamp. Well played, psychopaths. You've really outdone yourselves this time. Alright, thinking about that creepy dude certainly sends shivers up and down my spine at this time of year or any other. But we have plenty more frightening tales lined up ahead on this special Halloween edition of the show. So let's head into a music break now, and then we'll return on the other side with the 4 finalists from the Alien Buddha Press House of Horrors contest. Stay tuned.
I descended a dusty gravel ridge beneath the Bixby Canyon Bridge until I eventually arrived at the place where your soul had died, and barefoot in the shallow creek I grabbed some stones from underneath and waited for you to speak to me. In the silence it became so very clear that you had long ago disappeared. I cursed myself for being surprised that this didn't play like it did in my mind. All the way from San Francisco, as I chased the end of your road, 'cause I've still got miles to go.
welcome back to Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio with our Halloween special this evening. If there's anyone interested in appearing as a guest on a future episode of the program, please feel free to get in contact with me via email at 17numa@gmail.com. And our first guest tonight is calling in from Rome, Italy. Mihaela Melnick is actually a past friend of the show, having recorded several segments last year in her Mickey's Poetry Cafe feature. And so after all of those recorded segments, it's great to finally welcome you onto the air live. Mickey, how are you?
Hi, Thomas. I'm fine, thank you. And how are you?
Everything is going
I'm
great
so glad
so far.
to be finally here on air. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking forward to this show tonight, and congratulations on being one of the contestants in the Alien Buddha Press contest. On that note, here in 2021, it's been an exciting year for you so far with your writing. After having been a poet for several years, you finally decided to start sending your work out there into the world and have had some great initial success so far. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that experience diving into the literary field has been like?
Sure, of course. Well, the submissions, it's been quite an interesting journey, I dare say. What inspired me to do it, I think it was and still is the desire of being read, of finally having an audience to my poetry, to my stories, because, I kind of kept my poems and my thoughts to myself for so long, so it made no sense. So, because one usually writes to be read, not to be buried with his own manuscripts, on his chest. So, I started to send my works out. And at first, it was something that I did for myself. I've been writing for about 10 years now, and it was for my own pleasure, for my family, just to say my own thoughts, to leave something behind, But then I thought that I kind of risked to see those poems being lost, because whenever I used to shift through the folders and shift places, and they risk to be deleted and get lost. And I thought I better send them somewhere, so they stay better there. Actually, if you remember, the first time I submitted, it was in 2018 at Selah magazine. You were the editor there. You invited me over to submit. So, thanks to you that I first started to submit my poems around, and it felt good. It gave me some new confidence as a writer that in the days I really didn't have. You kind of pulled me out of my shell, I dare say.
Well, I'm glad to see that you're out there and having so much success with it now here in these last few months. And what has the response been from your friends and family so far? Yeah,
in fact, I started to submit to different journals and magazines a few months ago this year. And I'm so grateful to all those who published my work so far, because that allowed me to bring it forth and to reach out to many more readers than just my close friends or my family or my cat Bijou. So the response was really a great one, and I'm happy with it. It was great, and my close friends and family believed in me, I think, as a writer before I even believed it myself. So they supported me in this long journey all the time, and their support was always so precious and appreciated. And of course, I wouldn't be here today writing had it not been for your words of encouragement through the years. Yeah.
It's great to have that core of support to help you along. And one of the things that fascinates me about your writing, having originally been from Romania, now living in Italy, and also speaking English, is how do those three languages
coincide in your mind and work off of each other, and how does it affect your poetry?
Oh, it's terrible. I I really think it's terrible. Although it's also interesting and fascinates me too. I mean, sometimes there's such a confusion in my mind because, especially when I think of something in one language, and then I sit down to write it in a poem, but I choose to do it in a totally different language. So, because I've been speaking Italian for half of my life on a daily basis, but the other past half of my life, I spoke in my mother tongue, which is Romanian. So, I had these two languages well stuck in my head and inside of me. But I don't know why. Maybe because I like the musicality of the English language. Most of my writings are in English. Maybe also because I also read a lot in English poetry from my fellow poets and some novels, and I simply like it. So most of my poems are in English, I would say, yeah. And I enjoy it. I enjoy it.
The aspect of the translations that you've had published as well. Congratulations on that facet of
thank
your
you.
success so far. And on a more general note, what inspires your poetry, and what message do you hope the readers come away with after having encountered your work? What
inspires me? Well, I think I get inspired mostly from everyday life experiences. I mean, I often go around to the lake, into the woods. I do this. I take these trips, and I meet people. I watch the landscape and the nature and the human behaviors in different contexts, and really fascinate me a lot. And then somehow they kind of get stuck in my subconscious, I think, and I happen to wake up some mornings and with a poem to write or a story to tell, so I write it down. I think everything inspires me, and of course also my memories, because I have a lot of them from when I was in Romania, and sometimes I just think that it would be a pity if I forgot them. So I write them down before it's too late in some stories and some poetry. I scatter a bit of it around. So as for my audience, my hope is that my poems speak to them just as much as they allow them to speak. I mean, they should take my poems with the tweezers, I dare say. I mean, seriously, but not too much, not always, because I also like to play a bit with words. So, they should just read them through the prism of their own minds, and then let their own hearts decide what to take in and how, and what to throw to the bin. After all, poetry is sentiment, right?
Absolutely
this
important
is it.
to have those visions put out into the world, and then let people have their own visceral response to them subjectively, because poetry is such a subjective language. So here we are tonight. You're going to be talking about your short story in this Alien Buddha Press contest called The Gambler. Can you tell us a little bit about how it came about?
Yeah, The Gambler actually is about a guy and his friends that get in big troubles because of their vices and because of their superstitions they grew up with. So, the story is, like most stories, has a seed of truth to it. So I started to keeping in mind that seed, and I watered it and developed it in my mind until finally a few words came up, but I wasn't sure where exactly would they lead. But then as soon as my characters started to speak, I could envision them a little bit more clearly. So I took them, the characters, and the whole story a little bit more seriously. a little bit some like one of the characters in the story that is called Horse, that was very serious, was taken very seriously, the gypsies and their witchcraft. So I kind of walked that path with him and believing in what I was doing and what I was seeing and knowing. Yeah, and in that story, of course, a couple of strange things happened, and now that certain things happened and it ended the way it did, I kind of feel like it's only that story that was to be a standalone story at first. I kind of feel like it's only the beginning of the more articulated story. So maybe there will be a sequel to The Gambler. Almost certainly, almost. Because I'm already starting to plot it into my head somehow. So, yeah, it might have a sequel.
Well, that is certainly fantastic news. These characters deserve a little more life out there in the world. And as you know, I'm a big fan of this story, so I appreciate you having invited me to read it here tonight.
Yeah, this I really thank you so much because, I don't know why, but maybe this story sounds better if it's read by a man, because in part because of the words that I've put in the mouths of my characters, and in part because you read it better than I could ever do it, because I've already heard you and I know your voice is awesome. So yeah, it's better read by you, definitely, and I thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, but it's a great story, and let's dive into it now.
Okay.
The Gambler by Mihaela Melnick, as read by Scott Thomas Outler. After a night of revelry spent playing poker with Horse, Mayhap, and Batboy, Owl was drunk, but not so much to not be able to go to his house. Batboy was so drenched in booze that he'd passed out while talking earlier. Owl needed a nap away from those sewer rats that surely would have emptied his pockets if he allowed himself to fall asleep on Horse's worn, ragged couch. He had drained glasses of vodka down his throat all night long, interspersing them with frothy glasses of beer and pieces of beef, while with the same skill he grabbed the banknotes that those animals he called friends kept losing with every turn of cards. When Owl decided to head home, it was nearly dawn. He forced himself up from the armchair and made his way to the door through the thick smoke of cigarettes and sticky patches of stale beer that had dripped on the floor. Horse was in the bathroom, and Batboy was snoring between two dirty pillows on a bed that was strewn with cigarette butts and roast beef leftovers. Owl looked for his shoes, but they were nowhere to be seen. Who cares, Owl thought from the bottom of his blurred mind. He shrugged and decided to piece together a pair of shoes from a pile that contained all sorts of objects in the hallway. He found two boots alike, of at least 2 sizes larger than his actual number. He didn't care about the discrepancy one bit, though, given the nausea he was feeling in that moment. These must be Horse's hooves, he thought, sneering, with his forehead against the wall to keep his balance while he slipped in 1 foot at a time. "Horse, I'm leaving," he shouted towards the bathroom. Horse trotted out of there, relieved after having unloaded his bladder's burden. His eyes popped out upon noticing Owl's feet. "What the fuck, Owl? Those are my boots. Drop them," Horse neighed, craning his neck forward as usual whenever he wanted to assert himself. He rushed towards Owl with his Adam's apple nearly cutting the skin on his own neck, but he tripped over an empty bottle and sprawled out on the floor at his friend's feet in all his length. Once in that position of advantage, he put into act a series of absurd maneuvers with his huge, twiggy fingers, desperately trying to take back his shoes. Given the lack of success, he started to pull Owl by the jeans in hopes of making him fall as well. Owl burst into a howling laughter in the midst of chaos at the sight of Horse in that state. "Stop it, you fool! Be done with this play," he eventually cried while extricating his feet from Horse's frantic hands. "Get up, or I'll kick you right in the nostrils with your own boots," he sneered, in a tone halfway between annoyance and amusement. He felt a wave of nausea creeping up to his throat, and he pushed Horse away in disgust. "When I see Mayhap, I'll break his face," Owl growled between his teeth a little while later, Once it had been decided that Horse's brown clogs would remain upon his feet for now. "That son of a bitch must have stolen my boots," he cried again, mixing several curses throughout. "I fucking told you not to bring him here," Horse neighed indignantly, pulling his thin and comical figure in its entirety up off the floor. "He's like those gypsies down the street," he added with a knowing look, "not to be trusted. There are even rumors that his mother is a witch." He spoke the last few words with a lower voice and a grave expression on his camel face. Owl gave him an askance look and burst out laughing in his face. He could never take Horse seriously, no matter how hard he tried. "Why the hell did I name you Horse, I wonder, when you look more like a superstitious camel to me?" Owl was now at the door. "Anyway, buddy, I better get going, and you best go put your horn in the pillow and get some sleep. As for Mayhap," Owl added, "I'll give him his share sooner or later." He opened the door and stepped outside. "Tomorrow you'll get your boots back, don't worry," he concluded. Without waiting for an answer, he left, slamming the door behind him. Once outside, in the freezing air, he pulled up his hood and cautiously began putting one foot in front of the other, heading home, swaying like a cypress in the wind. It was a foggy morning, although still dark, of December. Heaps of dirty snow were piled up against the sidewalk, and large flakes fell densely upon the ground. Owl's legs felt heavy as lead wearing those boots not of his own and staggering along. He decided to sit down for a moment on the edge of the sidewalk under a street lamp where a little snowman had been built. He collected a handful of snow, rolled and shaped it in a little ball, and threw it in the street. Then he took the money out of his pocket and carefully counted it. $200. Not bad when he'd only invested 5. A smile crossed his lips. He seized 4 notes of 20 from the wad and hid them in the inner pocket of his jacket in case someone assaulted him. That alley had eyes, and he knew it well. Gypsies lived there, and he was, in a certain way, roaming their territory. He got up on his feet and kicked the snowman, at the risk of also sending one of the boots flying through the air. Then he entered a narrow alley between 2 rows of ramshackle buildings with black roofs half hidden by the fresh snow. After a few steps, Owl stopped again. He felt at peace with himself and opened his mouth to the sky, letting the snowflakes land and melt on his tongue. He also felt thirsty and hot. "Damn it, that vodka in the gut needs some water," he fancied. He scooped a handful of snow from a tree branch on the curb and ate it greedily. Then he took another handful from off the ground this time and used it to wash his face. He felt much better afterwards, and so with renewed energy he resumed his journey, whistling carefree in the slowly thinning night that was being penetrated by the opaque light of a misty dawn. He had been really lucky at poker. Gambling was his first nature. Drinking was his second. Between the two there was some human nature, too. At least that's what those who had ever asked for his help during desperate times had later told him. At that moment, just as he was pondering such reflections, he noticed out of the corner of his eye a figure darting off to his right. He snapped his head in that direction, but there he saw only fog and the low, barely visible black roofs covered with a thin layer of snow. Blaming the strange occurrence on his fatigue, as well as the large amount of liquor and snow he had swallowed, he began to hurry home with his cozy bed in mind when, suddenly, a voice whispered in his ear. "Hey, you! Look at me!" the voice said. Owl froze in place and looked around. Nobody appeared to be there in the thick silence. The voice is in my head, Owl thought. He continued walking while trying not to stumble over his own feet. The cold air and snow by this point had sucked the alcohol's vapors out of him, but hearing voices was never a good sign anyway. He buried his fists in his pockets and shook his head, not wanting to listen to his mind, which seemed to be playing tricks on him. "Hey, you! Don't you hear me?" the voice said again, shrill and impatient. Owl looked around, a little vexed, wondering who the hell would dare to play hide-and-seek with him at that time, or at any other time or season for that matter. Nobody would dare to make fun of him in his neighborhood. He was Owl, the gambler. Owl, the hothead. Owl, the executioner. He would have beaten to death anyone who dared to challenge him in any way. His knuckles had been made contact with so many jaws, that he could no longer close his fist without a grimace of pain. Only last night he had stomped the crap out of Bat Boy for drinking the last drop of vodka without asking his permission. And last week Horse had been punched in that camel face of his for eating the chicken wings that Owl had put aside for himself. He could give Horse and Bat Boy hay, punches, and water any time, anywhere. But now he was in the Gypsy Alley. All right, well, they were good guys, peaceful and happy, the Gypsies. Their main occupation was stealing without actually harming anyone physically, at least not on their street. Yes, good people, Owl thought. People of honor. If you dared to look at their women, the next day you were a dead man walking. Knowing this, Owl didn't feel like joking with them, so he hoped that the darting figure glimpsed just moments ago and the voices he heard were only in his head and weren't coming from one of those dismal mansions around him. He lowered his head and continued on his way, casting furtive glances around from time to time as a precautionary measure.
"Hey, you! Look up here and see how I dance," the voice said, again giggling.
It never sounded more real to Owl's ears. The strange voice wasn't in his mind, he was almost sure. Rather, it seemed to be coming from above his head. Owl raised his eyes and glanced a little worriedly at the roof of the house to his right. Up on the roof there looked to be, shrouded in fog, a child of about 6. He seemed to be wearing a very tight black jumpsuit, as if it were a second skin, if not the first, as was hypothesized by Owl, who suddenly could no longer think rationally. That little boy had a grin on his face that was horrible to behold. He did not show the same innocence that one expects to see on the face of such a small child. Owl narrowed his eyes and stood in astonishment as he tried to better understand the situation. "What the hell is this?" Owl said with half a voice. "Okay, I'm having a hallucination," he thought, a bit worried all the same. A child on the roof at this hour? In winter time and alone? And this little guy even has horns and a tail? He tried to trick his mind into thinking that he had nothing to worry about and said, "Hey, Halloween is over." But he found himself muttering the words weakly, speaking more to himself than to the vision he suspected he was a victim of. No, it must be a cat, he decided, or a goat that ran away from its farm. Even so, it seemed impossible and unreal, he thought, trying hard to collect all his neurons to properly put them to work. He blamed it on the fog, the booze. "Go away," Owl shouted, waving his hand in the air. "You're not real," he said, summoning the necessary courage to face the problem like a real man.
"Of course I'm real, you imbecile,"
the goat boy cried angrily.
"Now give me the shoes,"
the little fellow stated in a sweet voice through a disfigured grin. A strange sensation crossed Owl's chest, as if a snake had unrolled in his ribcage and was seeking a way out. The muscles in his back contracted along his spine, and in that moment he knew, he was sure, that this thing, human or animal, was certainly real. He felt this awareness to the marrow of his bones. He instantly became stone-cold sober. He looked around, seeking other people in his sight. It was still too early, but soon enough many people would be outside on their way to work. In the distance he saw a woman in a red coat. He hoped she would come towards him, but instead she turned the corner and disappeared from his view behind a building. He elongated his pace, staring straight ahead, trying to ignore that disturbing figure. But that little obscure being that seemed to have come out of the night's womb began to jump in the air, wagging its tail, sticking out its tongue, giggling in a creepy fashion. Owl, who at times still gave him quick glances, was unsettled beyond limits by the circus performance being given in that hour and place.
"Give me your shoes,"
cried again that goaty figure who was pointing a long black finger towards Owl. My shoes, Owl wondered. I don't have any shoes. I have horse's clogs, hoof-like stuff. He shivered at the thought of having hooves for feet and looked down in horror. Thank goodness, it's just a wide-awake nightmare, he muttered out loud in relief as his eyes met the boots. Go to hell, Owl yelled at the roof in his tarry host, but his bold voice did not prevent him from feeling a certain fear anyway. The goat boy looked Owl straight in the eyes. Owl began to tremble. Usually he wasn't easily impressed, but this creature that even in his mind he was afraid to name made his heart beat like a drum being played by a crazed monkey. He began to pray. This old trick didn't seem to calm down his shaken spirit, however, because that thing had begun to pray right along with him, only its verses were hauntingly being recited backwards. In a desperate state, he frantically fumbled in his pockets. There was only one option left to try to get out of trouble. He had to pay. A kind of tax for his body, for his life, and perhaps also for his soul. All those nights spent gambling, all those years consumed by drinking and fighting, had to be paid off in some way, he now realized. He pulled the money out of both pockets and threw it all up in the air towards the obscure dweller of the roof. "Take them," he gasped. "Go away and leave me alone," he implored. Then he started running because he felt like he had reached the bottom of rationality and was only one step away from entering the pit of the darkest superstition. The creature chased after him, leaping from roof to roof with horrible shrieks. Owl, who was overwhelmed with fear by now, stumbled away as fast as he could, repeatedly risking with each step the loss of one shoe or the other behind him for how large they were on his feet. He mentally cursed Mayhap, who, drunk as he was, had stolen, or more likely mistaken, their shoes. "Give me those damn shoes and I'll leave you alone," growled the creature during the wild and surreal pursuit. Owl could no longer endure to hear or see that thing, or to witness its whining and jumping and grinning, so he stopped, panting heavily, to take off the boots. He tossed them towards the satanic goat boy, and barefoot took off running again, slipping and falling several times until he finally made it to the safety inside his home. Once within, he locked the door behind him and blocked it by placing a chair under the handle. Without lingering on any other thoughts or actions, he headed straight to his room. He tore the wooden icon depicting Christ from the wall and raced into the kitchen. Guided by an invisible force, he made a spontaneous decision. The light of madness shone in his eyes. He lit the stove and threw the icon into the fire. Even now, years later, he is unable to explain why he did it. But as he watched the blackened wood being engulfed by flames on that fateful day, he swore to never gamble again. Not at night, at least. Then, with a vague expression on his face, he plunged exhaustedly onto the bed and instantly fell into a deep slumber. He woke up several hours later, around noon, with Batboy standing beside his bed staring at him with a dramatic expression. "What the hell are you doing here? How did you get in?" Owl asked as he sat up in bed and reached for the nightstand to grab a cigarette. "What a shit of rest did I have? I think I had a terrible nightmare. My head is aching. Holy shit. Did you at least bring a beer, or did you just come to look at—" "Horses dead," Batboy said. Owl fell silent with the words hanging midair. "He went out to get something to drink right after you left this morning," Batboy continued with a lost glance. "They found him in the gypsy alley. Some gypsy out there must have stolen his coat because I could swear he had it on when he went out. He was wearing only the black jumpsuit we gifted him for his birthday, and the boots."
All right, that was The Gambler by Mihaila Melnick. And welcome back to the show, Mickey. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. What a performance. Wow. I couldn't have done better, really.
Well, it was a joy reading it.
It was really great.
I certainly appreciate you coming on and opening up the show here tonight. Any final words you want to leave with everyone?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I wish to take a moment to thank Red Fox and the team at Alien Buddha Press for having selected my story, and both for the anthology and this contest, because I must be honest that through my pen, the characters in The Gambler have a voice, but through Alien Buddha Press and as well as through Songs of Selah now, they have an audience. And I'm immensely grateful for this opportunity. And I also wish to congratulate the other 3 finalists in the contest and wish them luck. And I'm looking forward to hear their stories. So I'm going to stay tuned, and I'll be here. So thank you again for having me, and thank you, Red. Thank you, Thomas, and see you next time. Hear you next time.
All right, absolutely. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Hope you have a great rest of your night ahead.
Same here. Okay.
All right, and Mickey had mentioned the other 3 contestants, and they're going to be coming up right around the bend. We're going to take a short music break here, and then we'll be back with Red Fox to tell us a little bit more about the contest. Stay tuned.
In the 5th dimension, in a dream I've never had, 'cause I just can't live like this, in a world like this. I just wanna kiss goodbye. We are not of this world. This fleeting moment, tucked away where no one owns it, wrapped up in a head, and by mistake got thrown away. And I am so homesick, but it ain't that bad, 'cause I'm homesick for the home I've never had. Get annoyed. I know just where I'm at. This is my song of joy. And now I know there are no secret tricks, no correct politics, liars and lunatics. And we are not of this world. Inside this fleeting moment, tucked away where no one owns it, wrapped up in a hate, and by mistake got thrown away. And I am so homesick, but it ain't that bad, 'cause I'm homesick for the home I've never had. Though I would not take it personally, it's just a child in me. Never really knew how much I had. Woe is me, I am so homesick, but it ain't that bad, 'cause I'm homesick for the home I've never had.
Welcome back to Songs of Selah. We're here with the Alien Buddha Press special featuring authors from the House of Horrors contest. And I wanted to bring on the show now the publisher and editor of Alien Buddha Press, Mr. Red Fox. How you doing tonight?
I'm great, Scott. How you doing?
Doing well, man. Enjoying it so far.
Cool. That was a great read you did of Michaela's story to start off the show. Great story, and also just read fantastically. You hit all the right spots and everything.
I appreciate it. And I know that Jacek Wilkos wasn't going to be able to join us tonight, but you'll be reading his story on his behalf, so I'm looking forward to that. But before we get into that segment, can you talk a little bit about how this contest came about and a little bit more about the anthology and just what's going on there with you at Alien Buddha Press here lately?
Sure. Well, this House of Horror Showdown is the first, but it's a part of the Alien Buddha's House of Horrors, and this is actually the fourth book in that series. And this year I just wanted it to be a little more fiction-based, add more fiction. There's still some great poetry and art inside the book, but once I figured let's make it have some horror stories in here, the idea to have a contest just kind of popped into my head at some point, and so we have the poll that's open right now. All the stories are written in a WordPress feature, and you can find it on social media. There's a link where you can read them all, and then if you go in the Alien Buddha Press Facebook group and find the pinned post, you can vote on the winner, and the winner will receive $100 cash prize, a subscription to Alien Buddha Zine, and the title of the very first ever House of Horror Showdown champion. That's a long-ass name, I know, every time I have to write it. And I'll be reading. Oh, and I also want to thank the guest judges who helped us pick these final four stories. Scott, you're one of them. Also, Julie Howard Hobson, who had a preview of her book, Hexes, Curses, a book of hexes and curses, written in a very poetic way. There's a preview of that book inside of House of Horrors 4, and the other guest judge, Samir Karimo, who worked on a cartoon that opens up the anthology. So thank you to all the guest judges. And yeah, I will be reading Jacek Wilkos's selection to the final four, and this is a short one. It's probably just a couple hundred words. Jacek wanted to read himself, but I think he's dealing with an illness in his family, so I'm hoping that everything with that works out better. But here we go. The story is called What's Your Emergency? 911, what's your emergency? Help, he ate them. Sir, calm down. Oh my God, he ate them alive. Sir, where are you? I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. What happened? We were performing a cardiac transplant. The heart was working fine, but after just a few moments, the patient flatlined. We tried to resuscitate him, but it failed. He died, and then his eyes opened. He bit the Dr. Ross and tore out his throat. I ran. Locking the operational room, I saw him and a nurse on the floor. She was screaming while he was eating her intestines. He looked at me and he got up on his feet. Blood was dripping from his mouth, his eyes. Dear God, we didn't close him. He still had his chest open. I could see his heart. It was beating. Sir, patrol is already on the way. Where exactly are you? I hid under a desk in the emergency room. Can you find a safer place to lock yourself from the inside? I'll try. Well, what was that? I hear something. Oh, God. It's him. He found me. No. Stay away. No. No. No! Sir? Sir? That was it. That was What's Your Emergency by Jacek Wilkos.
Right on. Great reading, Red. Very cool.
Thanks, Scott.
And
when he came in last minute and said something came up, he couldn't do it, and I looked at it again and I'm like, okay, I think this is one I can actually do. I think I can actually read this one.
Yeah, man, it sounded cool, and I want to reiterate what you said and hope everything's all right with him and his family out there in Poland. I think you said he was going to be calling in from.
Yeah, he's a regular in our anthology. He's a great writer. And, I can see why this piece got selected. It's not only is it a great standalone, it's great to put it in the middle of some other ones, you know. It's a great transitional one.
Absolutely. Got that nice segue.
I think about it like if it was the House of Horrors movie, like if it was one of those anthology horror movies. I mean, the book, like if it was one of those movies where it's like the short anthology pieces, like one after another. Like, this would be a great one to have, like, in the middle of, like we did here, like, a couple of the longer ones.
Yeah, it's kind of like a palate cleanser in a way. It gives a little interlude type of feeling.
Right, right.
Well, I also wanted to say, man, congratulations on this being the 4th year of that anthology. It's amazing how time flies, and it seems like Alien Buddha Press was just launching the other day, and here you are 4 years later doing a lot of good work out there. And any other projects you want to talk about?
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, this is one of my favorite ones that we do. I always make sure to hit this one every year and circle back around to House of Horrors. But one other thing I would like to mention, you're hearing about it here first. If you're hearing it, it's probably going to be a few weeks until I put out the official wide call, but feel free to send in your work if you're hearing it now. It's going to be What is the Deal with the Alien Buddha Part 2, a comedy anthology. We'll be accepting poetry, fiction, nonfiction, art. That is all comedy inspired, and I'm really excited about this one. I was talking to Amy, our cover artist, and she was so for the first one, we had the Alien Buddha looking like Jerry Seinfeld. This one, we were talking, she's saying she thinks she can get him looking like Chappelle for this one.
Right on. That'll be awesome.
So that should be fun.
All right. Very cool. And I know you've got that going on and always have so much else going on, so people should go check out your Facebook pages and on Twitter and your WordPress site and read these final 4 and cast their vote.
Hell yeah, and all these stories and a lot more great stuff is all in the Alien Buddha's House of Horrors 4, available on Amazon in paperback and hardcover.
Sweet. All right.
Thanks, Scott.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you helping set this up. It's always a blast.
Yeah, and great luck to everybody. I'm excited to hear from Ada and Kelsey next. Thank you.
Fantastic. And speaking on that, we'll be right back after this music break with Kelsey Bryan-Zwick reading her piece Femme Fatale in the Gun. Stay tuned.
When I look out my window, many sights to see. And when I look in my window, so many different people to be, that it's strange, so strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. Must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch, yeah. Must be the season of the witch. When I look over my shoulder, what do you think I see? Summer cat looking over his shoulder at me, and he's strange, sure is strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch, yeah. Beatniks out to make it rich. Oh no. be the season of the wind. Where'd I go? When I look out my window, what do you think I see? And when I look in my window, so many different people to be. It's strange, sure is strange. You got to pick up every stitch. You got to pick up every stitch. The rabbit's running in the ditch. Oh no, must be the season of the witch. Must be the season of the witch, yeah. Must be the season of the witch. Where'd I go?
All right, welcome back to Songs of Selah here on 17 Numa Radio. We're continuing along with our Halloween special featuring the final four contestants from the Alien Budapest House of Horror Showdown. And next up, our third guest of the night, I'd like to welcome Kelsey Bryan-Zwick to the program. Kelsey, how are you?
Hello, and thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Pleasure to have you on. Really enjoyed your story when I read it, and looking forward to hearing it from you tonight. First off, if you want to maybe just give us a little information about yourself, where you're calling from, and how's this Halloween season treating you so far?
Yeah, I'm tuning in from Long Beach, California, with my 3 cats and a fish, and my partner's also here today, so a little bit of an in-house audience always makes it nice. Really excited to be here and to share in this tradition of scary stories around, a fire pit or what have you. And wow, people all the way, authors all the way, Italy, Rome, Poland, I think I heard mentioned. Like I said, I'm here in California. I think this was advertised as Eastern time. Oh, sorry, I'm getting texts. I had a nephew born this weekend. So,
oh, congratulations.
I apologize if that gets interrupted. Yeah, thank you. Been very excited week here. So yeah, I'm an author. I mostly write poetry, but I've been dabbling in short stories and other forms of prose. This year, that was my main focus and goal, and this is sort of the highlight of that effort. I'm really excited to be a part of this anthology and to be vying for the championship with such a wonderful company. So,
yeah, very cool calling in from California. I'm over here in Georgia, and we got people from around the world, so that's a nice mixture, bringing in from everywhere here tonight. And when it comes to your writing and focusing on the short stories and fiction this year, is that something that you're delving more into? Has have your ideas been in other aspects of writing before, and what brought you to focus and hone in on that here in 2021?
I don't know what specifically made it happen this year. I took a few workshops, online workshops. There's a group called Culturama, and they do across the board writing, poetry, fiction, essays, how to submit, readings, and usually it's in person, but it was online this year, so I could attend, and it was really kind of an eye-opener in terms of just all the different things that I could be submitting to as a writer and the different ways I could be developing ideas and stories and characters. And what attracted me initially to writing as a kid was often, short novels. I really liked historical fiction, that kind of thing. I dream often about zombies.
Right on.
So that was another sort of impetus. Like, I know there's this story inside of me that feels more narrative and prosy than so yeah, I was just trying to flex and learn some skills as a writer. So I'm just lucky to have been able to explore that. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, before I ask you to dive into reading this story from the contest, are there any other projects or books or ideas that you'd like to talk about?
I'll just say, because there's no marketing budget for poetry. I just had a chapbook come out called Bone Water through Blanket Sea Press about my disability. I have scoliosis since I was a kiddo and have had many surgeries. So horror, gore, guts, blood, it's all part of that. And you can find me, The Exquisite Poet, on Instagram to learn more about my projects. And then I have a full-length book of poetry, woohoo, coming out in 2022, at the beginning of 2022, called Here Go the Knives. So again, sort of in that genre of sharp objects. And so yeah, that's what's been going on with me personally. It's very exciting. I love sharing about it. So thank you for the opportunity to do that here tonight.
Yeah, fantastic. Congratulations on both of those books. And I'm going to turn the stage over to you, and you can give us a rendition of your story around the campfire here.
Thank you. Femme Fatale and the Gun. She is all legs that go on and on, a velvet throat that has you thinking of all the wrong ends of a back alley. In black and white, you cannot see the poison of her eyes, but she has those eyes. You are already imagining the sleight of hand at the zipper of her dress, a smile that suggests her winsome intentions. Before she even hums a name, you begin to quiver at the mouth of her possible release. In your eye, she will only ever bend in a soft glow, ready, oh so ready to get close up. The Venetian blinds open and close, blinking in their voyeurism. A girl like that is always on exhibition. She could wear a paper sack, be shaved from head to toe. Something stiffens. You think it is your gun. You want something to be wrong so that you can muster up sweat and pheromones. Always something wrong. She's a woman, for crying out loud. Of course, you don't want to fix that. You want to cry out loud the way you already know the Venetian blinds will cry over this one. Looking up from between her legs, that endless pleasure. And just above the curve of her abdomen, there it is, winking at you. Nipple, now glistening with the wet stain of your saliva. Your head full with the stiff arch of moaning, her velvet throat, her hand on the back of your neck, gripping you hard like a gun. She wakes in the slant eye of silk sheets. With a twist of her wrist, the Venetian blinds open to a glaring of daylight, an eye too wide open, the way she's tied you up with gasping. You hadn't noticed the scars, her scars. Even now, in the dizzy before coffee glow of morning, you couldn't think much past these of nipple bone, thigh, the exquisite squeeze just below thigh, but those scars, her scars, the way they look now, they don't seem possible. Before you can consider the depth of them, the texture of finger imprint, there she is again on top of you, drawing out moans from beyond your capacity to reason. Bullet-shaped moans. As you pull the trigger, you know you will do it only, ever do it again. You feel the dark, warm stain absorb into the fabric of your suit, the red splatter across your freshly washed face, a fleck of blood dotting lips, the iron taste of it. You rub a smudge away from your eyes. You don't see the body draining blood, hypnotized with the possibility of again looking into the poison of her eyes. As that glowing pleasure passes through you, even now in the sweat of this heat, as you pat the corpse down for imprint, you continue to water at the thought of her as you flee the scene in a melt of wanting. You look up at her. You swear you see her, but you can't be sure. A remembered velvet intoxicates your mind. Bleary-eyed Venetian blinds. In a half-swoon, you stumble, unsure of where you're going. Only just wherever it is. You suspect she'll be there. The next morning, the cold heaviness of gun in your hand. You know you'd kill for her again. A death, le petit mort. Just a taste, sitting in a stupor you can't shake, dizzy with headiness. Your peace. You want her to love you for your peace. You begin to moan again, just for a whimper and a whiff of it. Your gun hardens with the thought, ready to beg. Somehow, from the smell, you know it is her blood. You rush through towards it, silk, sweat, velvet, stale smoke. Through all of that, the scent of her blood draws you out, makes you a little crazy with lust, and it crawls through the rest of your intentions, mad as any at a siren's call. Her breathing pulses like tinnitus in the scoop of your ears. Envisioning that late night reel of skin that prays over the attention of your gaze, rabid with a desire you can't drink. How to exhale. You rub your hand up against the thought of her skin, her legs that extend beyond physics, her bend, now just a wet dream wish. You begin to choke on the hope of attempting her inner pulse, holding your breath at her second mouth. Your skin tenses with the thought, a bit of saliva accumulating with desire. You hold your gun again. She is on you, mouth at the trigger pulse of your neck. Again, that quivering, your skin awash with want, gripped in the thought of her thigh, impressed of ankle bone, paralyzed with the thought, nipple in your mouth. You imagine her, formed so ripe inside the shape of perfect lip suckle, chin stubble, bristle, the paradise texture of it. She pulls the gun off you. You do not feel the rest of your senses drain away. Your mouth sounds of a bullet. Your voice caught somewhere you can't name. Smoke rises from the gut of your abdomen. You stiffen. You harden. You sigh, but cannot sigh. Remembered moan sticks a bit, so you startle a little. Your breathing grows shallow in the fever of your want. You wake like a soft cotton. You sleep in the curve of skin. When you make a sound, it is a moan, but it sounds like a bullet. All you feel now, the imprint of her mouth, her teeth on your skin, and still your blood rises for her. You want to beg, but your mouth doesn't move. Even if you still had a voice, you can't remember the words. You moan as she holds you like a gun. You moan. You never realize it's over, but there she is, standing above your body. Those endless legs. You know only she could have ever gotten you this hard up. And it shouldn't be funny, but the little bit of the ghost in you that's left laughs. Unheard, of course, on the ephemeral astral plane, your body there, limp, shriveled and suckered of its juices. What you wouldn't give to be milked again. A husk of yourself, only a carcass of a dream you eat at the delirium of. You feel cold now. A splayed gun, how you still fit the shape of her hand, the range of her bullet. You see it now, finally, how those legs really do go on. 8 of them, in fact, how that coy mouth conceals her fangs, how good she is with the ropes, so quick with the love knots. You forgot to recognize the web, love-bitten, until you were love-stuck, spun and sucked dry. Oh, how she sucked you dry. Still, you think, I'd do it again. Second, Spider Woman enters the scene. Her legs, twice as long, twice as endless. Your longing now just is multiplied as they begin to kiss the velvet of each other's throats, twist of limbs more inner thigh than body. Well, you know now, her velvet and legs, she was always after blood, and you would always take pleasure in giving it.
Bravo. All those legs that go on forever.
Nom nom.
Excellent piece, excellent reading.
Oh, thank you. Whew. Another little drink.
So, any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with here tonight?
Again, just thankful to, or maybe I haven't said it yet, thankful to Alien Buddha Press. I find their output of amazing books incredible and inspiring and wonderful and fun, and I was just really happy to participate, and thank you. So, and yes.
Right on. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, and congratulations on being one of the 4 finalists here, and good luck in the contest.
Thank you.
All right. So we've got one more guest lined up here tonight. Ada Wofford is going to be reading her piece, The Procession, when we come back from this short break. Stay tuned.
Close clock strikes 12 and moonshots burst out at you from the hiding place. Like acid and oil on a madman's face, as reasons tend to fly away. Like lesser birds on the four winds, yeah, like silver scrapes in May. And now the sand's become a crust, and most of you have gone away. Yeah, gone away. Come Susie Dale, let's take a walk, just out there upon the beach. I know you'll soon be married, and you want to know where winds come from. Well, it's never said at all on the map that Carrie reads. Behind the clock back there, you know, at the four winds bar. clock strikes 12 and moonshots burst out at you from the hiding place. Miss Karen and Susie Dill would find themselves at Four Winds Bar. It's the nexus of the crisis and the origin of storms. Just a place to hopelessly count the time. And then came me.
welcome back to Songs of Selah as we continue along with this Alien Budapest House of Horrors Showdown Halloween special. So far tonight we've heard stories from Mihaela Melnick, Jacek Wilkos, and Kelsey Bryan Zwick. And here to close out the show, our final contestant from the finalist is a past guest here on the program. So I want to welcome her back to the show, Ada Wofford. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Appreciate being on here tonight, hanging in there, coming in to clean things up here for us at the end with what is a great story. Really enjoyed it reading through the first time, so I'm looking forward to hearing your rendition of your own piece here tonight. But maybe before we get into that, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going on with your work here recently and how things are for you this holiday season?
Yeah, I just finished a novella for my master's thesis at the University of Rochester, and my advisor gave me some kind of, avant-garde presses he thought might be interested in it, so I'm working on that. And, yeah, beyond that, I'm just working on some short stories right now.
Very cool. So what turned you on to this House of Horrors contest, and what went into your piece? What was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, so this is an old story. This was published in a compilation called Gothic Blue Books Volume 5, I think in 2015. And I saw this contest, and, Alien Budapest is like one of my favorite presses because they're just always doing something different. And they said they accepted past published works, so I just threw my hat in the ring. And I wrote it. I used to do these exercises where I try to write Lovecraft stories, and obviously I'd leave out all of his, racism and xenophobia, because who wants that? But I always loved his prose style. He has this strangely convoluted prose style that somehow also has a movement to it and a grace to it, and I just wanted to kind of unlock what he's doing there with that dense prose. So this is one of those exercises, this story.
Very cool. And yeah, this piece does have a nice flow and tempo to it. You can definitely tell that. So looking forward to your reading, and I guess I'll turn the floor over to you and let you dive into the procession.
All right, thanks. All right, the procession. The cries and moans of killing could still be heard through the thick castle walls. Sealed and abandoned more than a century ago, many of us had forgotten about this ancient keep perched atop the hill and nestled amongst the thick copse. For others, they held a strange place in their hearts and led their minds wandering through fantastic myth and lore. I stumbled upon one of its secret entrances after that parader had knocked me into the sewers. Our town's grotesque tradition of the procession has taken place every decade for as long as even the oldest residents can remember, but it has never gone on like this before. It has been 3 nights now, and they are still roaming, soaking the streets with blood. I had been held up at my parents' house, never once to participate. We boarded up the windows and took refuge in a cramped basement, praying for the sound of church bells, which always signaled the end. Elderly and already quite ill from the long and hellish Italian summer, my parents passed in their sleep during the second night, almost as if they were one being. Perhaps it was from shock, from the procession, or maybe it was some divine deliverance. My mind finds comfort in the latter. They died huddled together against the cellar wall, clutching each other in their dead hands. Alone inside that stuffy cellar, the stench of their withering bodies engulfed my senses. I could taste it, see it, their pale, lifeless faces catching the light from our single lamp, partially illuminating their ghastly figures like some Baroque painting. It was unbearable. On the third night, as I thought I heard the sounds from outside begin to wane, I decided to make a break for my sister's house on the outskirts of the city. The August sun hung low and huge behind the gabled row homes lining the street. I had only journeyed a short distance when the curator, an older-looking fellow with the gleam of murder in his eyes, leapt at me from behind a pile of trash and corpses. I stumbled with shock and fell backward over a low railing into the open sewer which snakes through our city like a sickly river. Even the old man was sane enough not to follow me into that fetid miasma. He leaned over the railing, shouting incoherent curses as I surrendered myself to the current. I struggled to keep my head above the virulent water as it carried me farther and farther away from the center of the city. Eventually the sewer drained out into an underground basin littered with bodies. Here, the sewage only came to my knees. I made my way to a stone ledge and followed it through the darkness for what felt like hours. The only sounds were the rush of the waterfall that brought me here and the squeaks of rats echoing off the damp and ancient-looking walls. As the walkway came to a bend, I felt a rush of cool air and was brought before an open door which led to a wine cellar. I knew immediately that I had somehow found my way inside the castle. Not a soul has been known to have ever crossed its threshold. Tales and legends run numerous throughout the city. In the markets and schoolyards, many have spoken to the castle's myriad secrets, and always with a certain air of authority and scholarship, but only to make their claims a bit more exciting. Most of us would revel in these stories, but deep down we all understood that we were wholly ignorant of the castle's secrets. There were few, claiming to have been touched by the divine or to have heard mystical whisperings in their ears late at night, would hold to their stories of the castle without the fervor of maniacs. One of my most vivid childhood memories is of such a being. Walking home late from school one dark winter evening, a woman in rags revealed herself from within a shadowy crevice between buildings. She raised her arms to the sky and shouted, "Glory be to he who seeks eternal life by the procession, who cleanses the sins of man by the fire of the eternal. Glory be to the one who enters the castle, through the zenith of heaven to the great one's chamber, which sits above the world and everything. Glory be, glory be." As I ran through the lightly falling snow, I could still hear her shouting for several blocks. I've had many nightmares of this woman. The scene plays out exactly the same way, only I can't run. But the woman slowly approaches my paralyzed body as she screams, "Glory, glory be, glory, glory, glory." And just as she reaches out to grab me, I wake up. Every time. This woman was strong in my thoughts as I made my way through the wine cellar and up the narrow stairs to the kitchen. I still reeked of the sewers, but I had gradually grown accustomed to the scent and was able to make out the musty air of the damp castle. The kitchen was enormous, but ultimately unimpressive. There was nothing to look at. No food, obviously, a few utensils scattered about, and 2 large wood stoves with nothing but ash in them. But something urged me to press on, something other than curiosity. I made my way through the kitchen into the dark hallway of the servants' quarters. Even in the darkness, I could make out how bleak and bland these quarters were, which by contrast made the floor above seem all the more impressive. I ascended a handsome set of stairs and entered the second-floor corridor, a grand and enchanting piece of architecture, seemingly endless in both directions. The tall arched windows stood in the orange glow of a fiery dusk as the looming August sun continued its slow descent. Along the floor ran a tattered red carpet which had lovely ornate bordering done in black, and every 100 feet or so there could be seen an enigmatic circular crest of the most exquisite detail. As I progressed, I noticed a number of statues tucked away in little archways here and there between the corridor's myriad doors. Some of them were people, ancient, intelligent-looking people holding books or strange instruments, perhaps of the scientific nature. Others depicted otherworldly avian-like creatures that stood upright like humans, hunched over with lumbering spines and grotesque beaks attached to their tiny, ill-proportioned heads. The creatures wore curious garments and had long, claw-like fingers which also held books and strange instruments. Skulls were carved into the stonework above these statues, which held writing, perhaps a name or an inscription, but it was in a bizarre script, the characters of which I had never seen before. Though some of the archways contained nothing but an empty stone platform. Perhaps there were plans for other works of art that were never completed. I continued on, trying various doors along the way. All were locked but one. Its door, torn asunder from its hinges, lay at my feet. Beyond it, I found an ancient library of the grandest scale. Bookshelves that stretched to the heavens lined the walls. The muted and aged greens and browns of centuries-old tomes crammed into every available nook and crevice. Horribly worn Oriental rugs adorn the wooden floor in a haphazard pattern, some long ways, some slightly overlapping diagonally. The place was in the most picturesque state of disrepair one could imagine. Simple wooden tables were scattered about the library, some overturned along with the various papers and manuscripts they once held. Many of the chairs, which were of a lovely and quite curious build reminiscent of those once found in grand opera houses, were overturned or smashed, but a few remained standing, their cushions fuzzy with mold. I came across a table, but with a single book upon its surface. I opened its ancient cover as gently as one could, but immediately separated from the binding. The pages were yellow and warped with humidity. I took up a thin piece of debris from one of the destroyed chairs and used it as a blade with which to carefully turn the delicate pages without subjecting them to my fingers. It was some sort of manual for the local churches. I found a section that mentioned the procession. There was an etching of a man holding out another man with his boot as he sawed away at his victim's neck. The inscription read, "A parader and his offering." The book provided me with little information, as many of the pages pertaining to the procession seemed to have been crudely torn out. Most of what was left contained general information that everyone in town was well aware of. The procession's reoccurrence every 10 years, how it always falls on the full moon of the 7th lunar month, and a little bit about its ambiguous religious significance, primarily dealing with the custom of confirming the end of the procession by the ringing of church bells, with lengthy instructions on how this custom should be carried out, the length, the timbre, the notes, etc. Of the missing pages, a decent portion of one was left behind. I could make out the first word or so of each line and all of the final line. It read, "Hail to thee, glory, glory, thy plea, thy grant, born by, and by, eterna, glory, glory, glory." Looking up from the bewildering text, I noticed a small room connected to the back of the library, its entrance slightly obscured by its 2 toppled-over bookshelves. Something about it piqued my curiosity. Of course, I've always been curious about this place, this strange and fantastic edifice that seemed to persistently linger in the back of our minds. Or perhaps there was something else. Any reasonable mind would have turned back excuse me. Any reasonable mind would have turned back long ago. It's true, I had no knowledge of the dangers the castle held, but I was well aware of what lay outside its walls. So I pressed on. I managed to climb over the shelves and make it to the narrow archway. Inside, I found a curious little room with a glass dome ceiling and decorated with a set of statues. They stood in stone boxes filled with soil out of which ivy had at some point grown, but was now yellow with death. These statues depicted women in flowing garments, and the sinuous ivory which wrapped about them made the figures appear all the more elegant. There were 3. The left and right statues held out candles towards their respective directions, while the statue in the middle stood straight, her arms reaching upwards, and her eyes fixed downward towards whoever may be looking. I stood silently for some time, lost in the eyes of the statue as it stared down on me. The woman from my nightmares was caught forth once more, and the parallels made me shudder. The sudden sound of feet and the rustle of garments broke me from the statue's memorizing gaze. An old set of windows sat out of place at the end of the corridor. They were fogged over and opaque with age and protected by an ornate steel grating. All that could be seen through the windows was a faint orange. Towards them, I heard a man mumbling to himself. "How in God's name can someone be living here?" I said aloud. The moment these words left my lips, the strange mumbling ceased. "Is that a patron come to visit?" said a low and tired voice from the window. "What's your business here?" it asked. I stumbled over my speech as I attempted to explain myself. I spoke of the procession of the sewer, but before I could finish, the voice cut in. "Ah, yes, the procession." It seemed to linger on every word. What a lovely thing it is. The mumbling began once more and faded away to the sound of footsteps and the rustle of garments. I stood lost in bewilderment for some time. I shouted for the strange voice to return, but the vacant windows refused to speak. Suddenly, an enormous sound could be heard, as if the entire castle had shifted its weight. I followed the sound back over the toppled bookshelves and through the library to the corridor. I found its many lanterns jutting from the walls to be fully illuminated, the whole hallway bright as Christmas. It was a fantastic sight. I set out along the corridor once more. Now, illuminated by the brilliant light of the myriad lamps, I was able to better appreciate the exquisite detail of the sculptures. I came across another of their fantastic avian-like creatures and closely studied its craftsmanship. This one held an enormous scepter, at the top of which was set a lantern. The strange claws, the beak, the way its tattered garments hung from its malformed torso. Truly this was the work of a once brilliant artist. I raised my hand to feel its long beak when I jumped back in fright. A twitch, a stir. I swore I'd seen something. Again, there was the soft rumbling of stone, turn of its head. The creature broke from its pose. Its scepter began to shine a wondrous pale blue. I pressed myself against the wall in horror and awe as the creature stepped from its platform and proceeded down the corridor. Soon, more rumblings could be heard echoing through the cavernous castle. The strange creature lumbered down the corridor, his scepter shining bright as he leaned against it with every step for support. Then I saw the others begin to leave their platforms to follow the pale blue light. The ghastly parade marched along in slow silence as night finally began to dwell upon the castle. Overcome with wonder and curiosity or some other worldly impulse, I followed the strange procession. Through beautifully ornate arched doors and up a grand stairwell, I was led to the castle's throne room. The throne sat empty, and the strange beings huddled around it as if they were waiting for someone. I stood silent in the doorway. The one with the scepter turned its head to look at me. I froze. His gaze made my feet heavy. It turned around fully and held up its scepter. The others began to manipulate their strange instruments, and I quickly learned that despite their appearance, they were not of a scientific nature. Fantastic and impossible music began to form and resound off the walls. The pale blue light beckoned me. The music soothed me. I entered the throne room. The gathering parted as I proceeded towards the throne, an ancient cathedral of unearthly material, black and gold shining strangely in the pale blue of the scepter. The music grew louder as I took my seat, beginning to crescendo to an ungodly level. The players formed a circle around the throne as a ghastly figure began to approach me. Tattered garments hung gracefully from its feminine form, its arms stretched out above its head, its eyes fixed downward. It was the woman from my nightmare. She did not speak this time, though. She fell to her knees and in her hand grasped an onyx black dagger of the most bizarre and horrific design. I presented my right hand to the woman as if I had seen this before and knew the procedure. She gently cradled my forearm as she pressed the dagger into the palm of my hand. Crimson flowed out, the skin of my palm receded into itself as the blade made its way from my wrist to the tip of my middle finger. The crowd surrounding me began to part, revealing some twisted mess that almost had the guise of humanity. It convulsed towards me, my faculties entranced by the swirling polyrhythms of the musicians. I felt myself surrender to this lurid ritual as my hand was raised so that the twisted figure may drink from my flowing wound. The room seemed to disappear around us as the being partook of my communion, and the music violently vanished into silence. A man stepped forward and began speaking a strange language I somehow understood. He said an offering has been found and that the procession will conclude. He spoke of the Great One's chamber, gesturing towards the ceiling, and I was torn from my body. Released towards the sky, my spirit crossed the zenith of the universe, and I was forced to peer into the horrifying void of eternity. I was stripped across ancient cosmoses and saw myself shivering naked at the right hand of that twisted figure, which now stood upright like a man, its tenebrous skin adorned with patches of matted black fur. Horrible appendages that may have once been wings jutted from its back. They held a strange instrument or weapon that seemed to be made of its own skin. We were in a barren garret atop the castle. I convulsed amongst beds of straw and the may of lambs nuzzling at my breasts. The grotesque figure looked on with the kind of frightening approval that bespeaks an inhuman authority. A brief moan of grace fluttered across my eyelids, and I violently awoke on the ancient throne, the being staring at me. My hands were gray and misshapen, my spine felt heavy and foreign. As I opened my mouth to speak, nothing familiar could be felt, and a strange language flooded from my tongue. My body floated above those fantastic beings as they watched me with excitement. The one with the scepter was banging it against the ground with horrid applause. I knew then that it had ended. I knew then why it had lasted so long. I heard the familiar church bells echoing through the city as cries of joy drowned out the last moans of death. I was taken to a little archway tucked into the wall and stood upon the platform. My new form found its natural position, and I slowly fell asleep for 10 years. What was needed has been sought for since the last time. What was needed has been found. He rests now. The procession has ended. The dead may finally be buried. Hail, Great One, to thee we banished children call on. To thee our procession upon your world may cease. Glory to he who enters the castle. Glory to he who gives eternal life by the procession. Thy cleanse our world through thy grace. Thy grant us life through death's release. Born by the right hand of the Great One, and by the light of the seventh moon, eternal glory bestows upon you. Glory, glory, glory. The end.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Excellent reading. And an excellent story as well. I appreciate
Thank
you coming on and sharing with us tonight, Ada. And any other thoughts you have here to close the program out tonight? The rest of your 2000.
No, just thanks for having me on, and thanks the Alien Buddha Press for featuring me.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure having you on, and congratulations on being one of the 4 finalists, and all the best in the voting.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming on tonight, starting with Red Fox for setting this up. We had Mihaila Melnick, Jacek Wilkos, Kelsey Bryans-Wick, and that was Ada Wofford closing things out. Excellent readings by everyone, excellent stories, and if you'd like to read them on the page, you can click the link in the description box. That will take you to the Alien Buddha Press Facebook group, and there's a link there to their WordPress site where all the stories are contained, and then you can also cast your vote at that post. So once again, thanks everyone for sharing your words with us here tonight. Hope that everyone has a great Halloween ahead, and until next time.